All right, let's dive in. When you think of Apple, who pops into your head? For most of us, it's Steve Jobs, all
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
The iconic visionary, the rebel with a turtleneck who brought us the Mac, the iPod, the iPhone. He felt like the singular creative force that changed the world.
Totally. And today, that same company is not just changing the world, but wow, dominating it financially. It's
Yeah.
one of the most valuable companies ever, reaching market caps Jobs probably could only have dreamed of.
hmm
But the person steering that ship now is Tim Cook. And he's a leader in a profoundly different mold.
So our mission today, and we're guided here by the sources you share, there's a study analyzing the roles, various business articles, some biographical bits, is to really take a deep dive into that incredible transition.
Right.
We're going to unpack the distinct styles of Steve Jobs and Tim Cook, look at their impact on Apple's culture, its massive success, and just see what these sources tell us about leadership through their story.
Yeah, and it's important, like you said, we're sticking strictly to the material you provide for this.
Yeah.
The sources really ground us in the beginning, painting that picture of the Jobs era. It starts with the founding, April 1st, 1976, with Jobs, Wozniak, and Voyn.
Yeah.
They really pioneered the whole idea of the personal computer.
First the Apple I, and then really hitting the mainstream, well, relatively speaking back then, with the first Mac in '84.
Exactly. That early burst of creativity, the material says, led to those iconic products like the iPod and the iMac.
Yeah.
These weren't just popular, they were like globally desired.
Mhm.
It pushed Apple to a point where at one time, it apparently held the largest profit in the U.S.
Wow. So the sources really set the stage with Jobs as this visionary who built the foundation. Groundbreaking products, incredibly strong, almost cult-like brand identity.
But what's really striking in the material is the detail around Jobs' leadership style. It's described as incredibly complex,
Nah.
even, contradictory.
How so?
Well, he projected this image of being outwardly challenging, right, pushing boundaries.
Yeah.
But internally, the sources say, he maintained extremely tight control.
And the sources, well, they don't pull any punches on how he maintained that control, do they?
No, they don't. They characterize it as patriarchal and authoritarian, heavily influenced by his famous reality distortion field, and his, let's face it, undeniable charisma.
Right. And the material even mentions his personality traits, calling him a control freak, and suggests fitting diagnostic criteria for narcissistic personality disorder and how this really impacted management and the brand culture.
That's right. And the sources highlight some significant downsides to this style. They talk about him encouraging hostile internal competition, being notoriously difficult to work with,
Yeah, I've read about that.
prone to ruthless team management, and yes, narcissistically taking credit for others' work sometimes, according to these accounts.
And there's criticism mentioned too, right, about neglecting environmental issues, pollution from manufacturing, and maybe a lack of respect for workers' rights.
Yes, the sources connect that back to his provocative personal character, as they put it.
The sources even try to categorize it using management theory, like Ersart's model. They say initially exploitative, authoritative, system one, which sounds pretty intense.
It does, basically ruling through fear and intimidation to get obedience.
Yeah.
Later, maybe shifting slightly to benevolent authoritative, system two, still top-down, but perhaps less aggressive.
And PM theory, high on performance, the P, but low on group maintenance, the M.
Exactly. Which, if you look at the managerial grid framework, corresponds to that 9.1 task management style.
Yeah.
The focus was just results, 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 often, it seems, without much regard for the people involved.
And where was that focus directed?
According to the material.
Yeah.
Entirely on product culture and design. But it points out he largely delegated responsibility for the supply chain, the nitty-gritty logistics of making and shipping stuff after Tim Cook joined.
Oh, okay.
Even his approach to privacy, which Apple is so vocal about now, is framed differently in the sources regarding Jobs. They suggest he maintained more of a facade of respecting it.
Oh.
Yeah, while maybe trying to control user choice and data behind the scenes, they describe him using this persistent questioning approach until people sort of reluctantly gave consent. The implication being, if it were technically possible to exploit data without consent back then, he might have been inclined to.
Wow. So the picture painted by the sources suggests that towards the end, his style wasn't just the young rebel anymore. It became more like a, quote, father with the attraction of religion.
That's the phrase used, yeah. Pushing towards a more patriarchal culture, potentially leading to issues like cultural discrimination, and maybe impacting how human rights were considered in the brand design itself.
It's definitely a multi-layered picture the sources paint of him. Very complex.
Okay, so that sets the scene for the Jobs era. Revolutionary products, charisma off the charts, but also, well, significant documented challenges in management style and culture.
So how does Tim Cook step into this picture? The sources introduce him and immediately seem to highlight his foundational role, handling the logistics.
Exactly. The operational side. Understanding and building out that incredibly complex and eventually efficient supply chain. Managing inventory, distribution, finance, marketing.
The less glamorous stuff, maybe?
Perhaps, but the sources make a really strong case that this logistical mastery is the unique and essential role of a good CEO, at least in this context.
Why essential?
Well, they argue this is the person who builds the company's sturdy foundation, the one who can take all that creative genius, that vision, and actually convert it into efficient profit.
Right. Make it work at scale.
And more than that, provide a positive feedback environment that allows employee creativity to flourish while keeping a firm grasp on all the operational levers. It's presented as a direct contrast to Jobs, who, as the sources noted, kind of handed off that critical supply chain piece.
Makes sense. And the results under Cook, just looking at the data and descriptions in the material you shared, they are pretty stunning.
Aren't they? Massive market cap growth, crossing $1 trillion in August 2018.
Which seemed unbelievable at the time.
And then hitting an unprecedented $3 trillion on January 4, 2022. Just incredible numbers.
But the sources suggest it wasn't just bigger, right? It was different.
Exactly. The analysis indicates the growth under Cook wasn't just about scale. It was also higher and more mature compared to the Jobs era. You can see that reflected in the stock price, sales, net profit trends discussed in the study.
And there's a strategic shift mentioned, too.
Oh, a crucial one highlighted in the material. Apple's business approach moved beyond just focusing on manufacturing hardware volume. It shifted significantly towards being a, quote, service industry design.
Leveraging that huge user base.
Precisely. Over 800 million users mentioned, generating stable, recurring operating profit from the App Store, Apple Music, iCloud, that whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
This pivot, the sources explain, stabilized revenue streams and really allowed the Apple brand to expand its scope.
So beyond the explosion in value, the sources seem to spend a lot of time on how Cook tackled ethical and cultural issues. This wasn't just a side note for him, according to this material.
No, not at all. It seems like a major focus. The sources emphasized that Cook significantly elevated Apple's corporate ethics and sense of morality, genuinely integrating high levels of corporate social responsibility, CSR, into the culture.
And a prime example discussed is the Foxconn supply chain crisis.
Yes, that's detailed quite a bit. Serious labor issues at partner factories, initially in China, later challenges in India too.
Oh.
The sources explain it stemmed from Apple's reliance on partners like Foxconn for cheap labor.
Which led to scandals.
Right? Well-documented scandals around working conditions, some instances of child labor reported, pollution concerns. It became very prominent right around the leadership transition.
And how did Cook handle it, according to the sources?
The material details how he specifically navigated this by putting pressure on Foxconn to improve conditions and human rights. Now, the sources are realistic. They acknowledge fully resolving these global supply chain complexities is an ongoing challenge, even when they were written.
Sure, it's not simple.
But they frame Cook's actions here as a significant case where actively managing social responsibility led to positive social change and created value for Apple. They use it to push back against the idea that, short-term oriented management doesn't bring economic returns. They suggest ethical management actually can be good for the bottom line long term.
That's interesting. And the environment. The sources seem to document a lot there, too.
Oh, yeah, extensively.
Yeah.
Billions invested through green bonds, that really ambitious goal to be carbon neutral by 2030 across the whole supply chain and product's life cycle.
That's huge.
It is. Plus, increasing use of recycled materials, tungsten, rare earths, cobalts, tin, gold in their products, eliminating harmful stuff like mercury, PVC, beryllium, VFRs,
Yeah.
brominated flame retardants, often used in plastics. Also efforts like reducing plastic packaging, achieving zero unrecoverable waste in Mac screens, using low-carbon aluminum. And the material quotes Cook directly, linking climate action to driving innovation and growth.
So a very different focus there. What about user rights and privacy? The sources seem to draw a sharp contrast with the past.
Very sharp. They describe Cook's respect for user privacy as, well, authentic and deeply held, not just a PR stance.
And the San Bernardino terrorist attack crisis is presented as a key test case.
Exactly. The FBI asking Apple to build a back door, essentially a new unlocking iOS, to get into the attacker's iPhones. The sources explained Cook's refusal wasn't just about that one phone. It was based squarely on the risk.
The risk of creating a master key, basically.
Precisely. Creating a vulnerability that, if it ever got leaked or misused, could threaten the privacy and security of millions of Apple users worldwide. That was the argument detailed.
And how did that play out? It was controversial at first.
It was. But the sources note that public opinion actually shifted over time as people understood the potential risks better and as the FBI, well, eventually found its own way into the phone. This stance, the sources highlight, ended up significantly strengthening Apple's brand image for protecting user data.
And Cook has been vocal about other companies too, hasn't he?
Yes, the material points out his clear public disagreement with the business models of companies like Google and Facebook, specifically regarding the extensive use of user privacy data for advertising and control. He's quoted in the sources saying it violates ethics and isn't in the long-term interest.
Okay, so that's the external picture. What about inside Apple? How did Cook's style affect the internal culture, according to these sources?
Well, they discuss how his leadership style seems to genuinely support the spiritual needs of employees, contributing to a more positive work environment.
Spiritual needs? How so?
It's linked in the material to theories of meaning realization and self-transcendent needs. The idea that people want their work to mean something, to contribute to something larger than just profits. His meticulous, values-driven approach, the sources suggest, inspires people to see their work as a social contribution and find their business value within that mission.
That sounds quite different from the environment described earlier under Jobs.
It does. This approach, according to the sources, actively protects and utilizes the creativity of the product design teams, still the core of Apple, right? And enhances what they call the psychological capital of employees. Things like optimism, resilience.
Which is contrasted with Jobs' style.
Yes. Which the sources indicated could be detrimental to those aspects, potentially leading to resistance or burnout. Cook's style is presented as fostering psychological well-being.
The sources also mention knowledge management, SCCI model.
Yeah, that's referenced. Looking at how knowledge, both tacit kind of intuitive stuff and explicit written down stuff, is shared and created. The suggestion is that Cook's environment fostered better cooperation and information sharing among R&D teams.
Helping them generate ideas faster.
Exactly. Accelerating knowledge generation and ultimately value creation for the company.
What about structure? The sources touch on Apple's functional structure.
They do, where the CEO effectively oversees different processes like marketing and R&D directly. The sources note this structure helps with communication and decision-making. They mention it alongside terms like flexible bureaucracy and vertical power responsibility grading, suggesting a clear hierarchy, but one that's adaptable.
And finally, there were some recommended strategies for building strong company culture mentioned in one source, possibly reflecting Cook's era.
Right. Things you might expect, but important nonetheless. Promoting open communication town halls, surveys, increasing transparency, regular updates, feedback mechanisms, making meetings inclusive, supporting work-life balance, flexible work, wellness programs, EAPs.
EAPs.
Employee assistance programs, also actively encouraging innovation from everyone, and crucially, leaders modeling the behavior they want to see. Visible leadership, mentorship, aligning with values.
Okay, so pulling all this together then from the sources you shared for this deep dive, we really see two incredibly different figures, but both absolutely pivotal for Apple.
Definitely. You've got Steve Jobs, the undisputed product visionary, built the foundation, revolutionary products, that incredibly intense brand identity. But as the sources clearly detail, his leadership came with, well, significant human and ethical costs outlined in the material.
And then Tim Cook steps in, characterized by these sources as the operational master, yes, but also the ethical reformer.
Right. He scaled the company to financial heights nobody imagined, navigated these huge ethical crises, Foxconn, the FBI confrontation, and fostered a culture that, according to the sources, placed a much higher premium on corporate responsibility and user trust, user well-being.
All while successfully evolving Apple into the services giant alongside its hardware strength.
The sources portray both as symbolic figures, really embodying different crucial phases and priorities in Apple's organizational culture.
What's particularly striking, though, is that conclusions some sources reach that Cook's era actually achieved more significant and outstanding achievements and represented better management than Jobs. That's quite a statement.
It is. And the point seems to be, it wasn't just about the bigger numbers, the trillions of dollars. According to the material, it involved a fundamental shift in the company's core priorities towards that corporate responsibility, towards building deeper user trust through ethical practice.
Which leads to a really interesting final thought for you, our listener, to maybe mull over, doesn't it?
Hmm.
The sources seem to suggest that perhaps these aspects of leadership, the less flashy, more operational, ethical, cultural pieces, aren't just nice to haves. Maybe they're actually more crucial for sustained, mature success and growth than even pure product vision, especially once that initial visionary spark has already built the foundation. Something to think about.